Hello, everyone. Welcome to Functionally Enlightened. Today, we have another special episode, and we're bringing on Claudia, who is another chronic illness warrior, and I'm super excited to share her story here. I think you're going to get a lot of insight from her journey, as it's different from the other guests that we've had on the show. So, a lot of you may have been experiencing chronic illness. Well, Claudia's story is going to really, throw you for a loop in how things kind of progressed on her end. So before I bring her on, I'm going to give you a brief bio. Claudia is a first-generation graduate and faith-driven servant leader who firmly believes that there is so much strength in vulnerability. She holds a master's degree in higher ed counseling and has dedicated her career to paying it forward by empowering other first-gens. Through life's greatest challenges, Claudia has turned to prayer and community as a form of healing. After experiencing adversity at different stages in her own life, she discovered a deep desire to inspire others by sharing her testimony. By age 18, Claudia suffered the loss of both parents due to different forms of cancer. And by age 30, she came very close to losing her own life after undergoing an unexpected decline in health. However, it was in the midst of each of these physical and spiritual battles that she felt God's presence the most. Today, she wears her scars proudly and is eternally grateful to God for giving her the willpower to transform her pain into purpose. So, Claudia, again, we're super excited to have you on the show, and we'll allow you to introduce yourself a little bit more in detail.
Thank you for that introduction, and thank you again for having me and just giving me another opportunity to be able to share my testimony. So yeah, I guess what my bio kind of covered, I think a big chunk of, what I'll be talking about a little bit today, but outside of what wasn't mentioned already, in my day-to-day, I am just I think a regular person who is just trying to live life at its fullest. I enjoy, just choosing happiness and in any situation that I'm given. And I, use that outlook in life, that life is short. And especially going through what I've been through, I really just try my best to seek the joy in things. And I intentionally wore this shirt today for this recording that says fearless, not because I am someone that just does not fear anymore, but because I aspire to be more fearless every day. I've learned through my testimony and my life experiences that when we surrender our fears and our anxieties and all the things that we cannot control to God, that is where we can experience true peace. And it's a daily struggle because we're human, right? And what person doesn't feel anxiety when they realize that they don't have full control over a situation? I know at least I do. So I just choose to try to embrace some of that unknown and some of those uncertainties, and remind myself through my past experiences, through my testimony, that there's a God who loves you. There's a God who, is good. And, he has carried me through every part of my journey. And so I'm excited to share a little bit about, pieces of that story today with you.
I gravitate towards people who have this profound sense of faith that kind of, what's the word that I want to say? It like percolates from them. So it might not be super dramatic. Maybe a stranger comes by, but they can sense a presence within that person. So I see that light in you just even through Zoom here. I can see it in you, and I can feel it by the words that you're expressing. So if we want to take it back, you had several milestones in your life that were very impactful. And as a young girl, or I don't, what was the age when your parents passed away?
Yeah, so two separate, I guess, really critical times in my life. One, my mother passed away first when I was 9 years old, just a month shy of turning for my 10th birthday. She had been dealing with her battle with cancer for about 2 years. And then my father, he passed away my first semester of college. So also a really critical time in my life. And his cancer was very unexpected. And from the time of diagnosis to the time of him passing, it all happened within 6 months. So it was a really, really fast decline. And both losses taught me something very different, but have inevitably shaped me into the person I am today. And I do believe that those experiences also in some ways helped me cope and with the trauma that I was going to later on face with my own health battles.
As you're going through college and you hit this dramatic event in your life, you feel the impacts of that. Did it make you a little stronger, a little more resilient, or do you feel like it took some time to kind of work your way to that level?
Yeah, no, I think resilience is a perfect word to encapsulate a lot of this. I think that from age 9, God was very intentional with placing people and circumstances that was going to allow me to nurture that resilience because he knew what was going to happen next. And so from age 9, I found myself, I think like any child, when you suffer the loss, having so many questions, going through stages of just resentment, questioning God, why is this happening? My father also during that time fell into his own depression. He was a father of 3. I was the youngest of 3, 2 older brothers. A father not knowing what to do, with 3 children after, losing the love of his life, fell into like alcoholism, and observing all of that as a child, it was very difficult. And I had a lot of my own moments where I had to, there were lessons in that time period too, because I was experiencing a lot of resentment towards my father for not being this superhuman figure that I expected him to be. At the time, I wasn't. As a 9-year-old, you look at your parent as someone who's just meant to have it all together and just be there for you. And you don't realize that they're human too. And so it wasn't until maybe the week leading up to me going away to college, because I started college the summer of before my first semester, because I went in through Seton Hall University's Educational Opportunity Program, which I also believe was God's very intentional way of providing me with the support I was going to need. And so I say that to say that, that week leading up to college, I think it was actually that year, like my senior year of high school, kind of just felt like this switch happened in me. And I do believe, again, this was God's way of just transforming my heart and replacing that resentment with forgiveness. So my mother's loss really taught me about what it meant to be a helper, right? My mom was someone who I feel like a lot of who I see myself a lot in her, because she was someone that despite going through this 2-year battle with cancer, she was always someone who maintained such strong faith, kept this very positive energy. And so I feel like she gave me the foundations of what I was going to need later on when I was 30. And then for my father, that the greatest lesson that I feel like I learned with him was forgiveness, right? And seeing him as a human that he was, and realizing that he not only had absorbed the pain of losing his wife, but he had also absorbed the pain of losing the mother of his 3 children and seeing his children suffer too. And so something happened in me where I learned that and it clicked. And so I started to view my father through the lens of being a human being. And so that's where empathy came in. And I no longer felt like that resistance. And so I started to actually be able to form a better relationship with him in that last year of what was going to be his life, without knowing that his time was going to be cut short. But I'm so grateful for that healing and that change that happened in my heart. And I credit that to God. And so when I got to college and learned that I was reliving this nightmare again of, losing another parent, I would say resilience was really like the fabric of getting me through that. And I actually realized that it wasn't even just a matter about being resilient. It was the support that I was surrounded with. God placing these guardian angels in my life, having the EOP staff be able to support me through that journey, having a community of people who were there to pray with me, take me to the hospital to spend time with my father. And that semester of college, despite all of that, I think that was the highest GPA I achieved, because seeing my father go through that battle, I use that as kind of fuel to not make excuses and work harder. And I think my philosophy in life has been, I can choose to take this pain and approach it 2 different ways. I can just let my life be about sadness and just feeling bitter and sitting in that pain, or I can choose to use that and make something of it, right? And I chose the latter, and I think that that's what's helped me get through a lot of these really difficult moments in life.
Absolutely. So you found purpose in the pain. And that's the thing that I see about these resilient. Most of my guests have been women chronic illness warriors, but that's not to say men aren't experiencing similar situations. It's maybe we're more vocal. I don't know what it is, but I want to fast forward a little bit now to a more current extreme hardship that you've experienced, and that's where you and I kind of became acquainted. So if you could share with our audience the methods that you had to use to be able to recover from the hardships that you experienced.
Yeah, definitely. So I think I can start by saying, so 2020 was a rough year for, I think, just about everybody. With the pandemic, it really shook all of us up in a way that had us all living in a state of anxiety because there was just so much unknown. For someone like me who has gone through trauma and loss in situations where I had zero control, I think that that definitely informed the way I grew up, and the kind of woman that I turned out to be, right, in those following years. And so, what that manifested into was being someone who, I always had faith in God, and I always had this understanding like of who God was and what he was capable of. But there had yet to be a moment where I was tested in my own body, in the ways that my parents were. And so I've always been someone who views myself as very independent. It likes to be in control to manage my anxiety, as I mentioned, as a result of that trauma. And so insert, 2020, the pandemic happens. That's a, frightening time. And then September of 2020 was when life as I once knew it just completely changed and it was never going to be the same again. I started developing these pains in my abdomen, and I had been perfectly healthy up until that moment. So like most people, I think like me, really underestimated what was actually happening, or that never imagined what I was going to find out was actually going to be the case. But long story short, I waited a week because I was being stubborn, and also with this kind of lends itself to, some criticism on our country's like healthcare system. But I was very hesitant to go to the emergency room because I was concerned about getting this big fat bill. Now, looking back, I realize that you can't put a price on your health. So if your body is telling you something, listen to it. So I waited a week until I was in a state of no longer being able to tolerate this increasing abdominal pain. I wasn't able to tolerate any food, drinks. I was vomiting. That all should have been a sign to just go straight to the ER, but even then I was resistant. Finally, I went to the emergency room, and at the time, my husband, fiance back then, he had actually he was visiting his parents in Orlando. Since the pandemic had happened, he hadn't gotten a chance to see his parents in a while. September 2020 was safe enough time where he felt comfortable enough to go visit them. And so I was alone at home when I was experiencing all of this, which is also another, I think, example of how, God was really ensuring that I was going to get the care I needed, because God forbid something would have happened, I would have been home alone. But that's neither here nor there. I get to the emergency room and they basically let me know that I needed emergency surgery. They discovered that I had life-threatening blood clots in what's called my portal vein, which supplies a blood flow to really critical parts of your body. For me, my intestines. And so they also discovered that there was a malrotation, or my intestine had twisted. So essentially my intestines were dying. And what that meant is that I was dying as well. And so things just got progressively worse before they got better. By the next day of me being admitted into the emergency room, my husband, Frank, he flew back into Jersey, and I was placed in an induced coma for the next like month and a half. And during that month and a half, there was just in and out surgeries, a lot of out of the box thinking to really think about how to save my life, and not just save my life, but preserve quality of life. But, to God be the glory. I was able to get transferred to a hospital in New York, Mount Sinai, where there was a team of experts who were equipped to do the unthinkable and to really just take a chance with me. And to this day, I still keep in touch with my surgeons. I still see them from time to time, and they never cease to they never hesitate to remind me that people who presented with a rare case like myself, the majority were either did not make it, did not have a good quality of life, or in the off chance, had the best case scenario, which was my case. And they themselves as science-based thinkers have used the word miracle to describe what really was able to, to describe what happened and why I was able to recover in the way that I was able to recover. But what I left out in that story was that in between all of that, that healing journey wasn't linear. Things got better. Initially, once they woke me from that induced coma, I got sent home to do some healing. They left my intestines detached. I was like a little Frankenstein at home. Have no idea to this day how they came up with the science to be able to do this, but I was unable to eat or drink for 6 months to give my intestines time to heal. And the way they were able to still keep me alive was through IV nutrition called TPN. And I was able to get that treatment from home, which I'm very grateful for, because otherwise I would have had to spend the majority of those months in the hospital, which would have been torture. So I was able to, recover and heal and find community and really grow my faith from home. Prayer, sharing my story online, I think was a big part of my healing journey too. As I mentioned in my bio, I found strength through vulnerability. And to this day, I still come across people who I don't really have close relationships with, but I haven't seen them since before I even got sick. And so they'll mention, I was praying for you. And I truly believe that all of those prayers, when you put them all together, is what made all the difference for me.
That's a beautiful story of recovery. You look fantastic. Like just looking at you, it doesn't look like you experienced. And I guess it is a chronic illness in a sense because of the recovery period. So it's not something that was acute and, you recovered within a week or two.
Yeah.
You mentioned a little bit in terms of leading up to this event. Was there anything that you had noticed, anything different, maybe increased stress loads, or is there anything that you can kind of point to?
No, honestly, I mean, I wasn't the healthiest eater, but I've asked these questions to this day. We still don't know what caused this episode. I guess I don't fit the description of someone who has a chronic illness, and even by definition, I don't fit the definition of short gut syndrome because by God's miracle, my team was able to salvage the majority of my intestines. And there's a story that my husband has told because it was really from his perspective. I was in this induced coma during this time, but these surgeons told my husband that they were 100% sure my intestines were dead. They were getting ready to remove it altogether and put me on standby for an intestinal transplant, which is not a simple surgery, nor is it like something that you really want to wish on anyone. But these surgeons said, I'm 100% sure her intestines are dead, but I'm going to check one more time. And lo and behold, they checked again and they were not dead. They were still alive. And the number of prayers that were coming in from what I'm told during that time were insurmountable. So I do truly believe that was an example of God's miracle. There was another instance of, me having a surgery done, vascular work, where they had to kind of buy time and reroute blood flow. And there was a really, really high risk of me not making it on that, off that operating table. And my family, like they recount this story and I get chills when I hear it. Like they all stayed together in a hotel room in New York City because my family is based in New Jersey. And so they stayed close by because it was a big moment. And the way they describe how they just immersed themselves and surrendered themselves to God and prayed for God to save my life. And then I came out of that procedure and it was kind of the starting point of like, okay, we're a little bit out of the danger zone, but like we still have a long journey ahead. And so, like I said, my health healing journey wasn't linear. Like I got a little bit better. I was able to start eating again. And then I stopped tolerating food and had to go back into the hospital summer of 21, had to do more surgery. But since summer of 21, I have been surgery free. I no longer need TPN. I am eating like a normal person. Of course, there are lasting impacts of everything I went through. So like I mentioned earlier, I don't think I don't fit the definition of having a chronic illness, but there are certain life changes that are left. There's consequences for everything that my body went through that I'm forever going to have to deal with. So like just for example, like recently I've been revisiting like these surgeons to kind of just understand what my body composition is like now and what are some things to look out for. And so, from time to time, like I'm still seeing my surgeons just to make sure that I'm trying to live life as safely as possible and trying to be proactive with my health.
But at the same time, you're not letting this trauma of the events weigh you down. You're still going forward with your goals, your dreams, your aspirations.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think after going through a near-death experience, at least the way that for me, it's definitely invigorated. I've always had this kind of like larger than life attitude. I just want to, I feel like life gives you so much pain. And so that part is non-negotiable. Like we know that suffering is a part of life. And so I try to manufacture as many happy moments as I possibly can. And after going through this near-death experience, that desire to seize the day just increased even more. My husband and I have like very different perspectives on life now. Him as a caretaker, right? Because he saw me through this journey. He is very protective and is more hesitant to and I understand that perspective. Whereas me, I just want to do it all. Like put me on the roller coaster, like take me, have me jump off the plane. Like I just want to embrace all that life has to offer. But I think we make a perfect balance because sometimes I do need to reel it back and remember that while, I don't ever want to feel limited again, because during that time of healing, I lost all autonomy over my body. I could not do anything for myself. I had to rely on my husband to do everything, wash my hair. I couldn't even bend down. And so that was a really difficult time, I think, mentally and emotionally for me to realize that as someone who always lived her life really independently, needed to surrender myself. And that concept of just surrendering was a journey in and of itself. And even like surrendering all of my fears and worries to God, it was a process. But at the end of it all, I discovered peace, as I mentioned. When we work every day to try to have it all together, it requires a lot of effort, and you realize over time that it really wears at you. And it's not until you experience surrendering all of that that you discover like, oh wow, like this is what true peace feels like. God's peace, not the form of peace that the world can offer you, but truly just surrendering it all when you're in the eye of the storm.
Yeah. I sometimes wonder if these type of scenarios happen to us, not necessarily because we need a wake-up call, but because we do have personality types that kind of are go, 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 never pull back and make time for yourself, for your personal care, for, making those lifestyle changes that are really essential to finding exactly what you're talking about, that peace, because we won't be able to find that peace if we're 100% in our careers or even in child rearing, I guess you can say.
Mhm.
But learning, and this is a personal experience of mine, learning that independence can come crashing down and that you have to have a dependence on our creator. So, and that's the only thing that can really carry us through. And then having faith that all the right people and the right circumstances are going to present
Mhm.
themselves, not necessarily the way we see it and we think it's going to happen best, but our creator has a plan, a better plan than what we could have imagined. It might
Yeah.
not necessarily show in our lives and the way we feel, but we have to take ourselves out of the current, like the negative part of it.
Absolutely. And it was a humbling experience to say the least. And, I had been reminded of of that concept at other stages of my life, but this, rock bottom moment was, I think, just took the cake, right? If that's an expression. But I do recall there was a time I wasn't always so strong in my faith. It really was, my healing journey was really was very up and down. And I was very honest about that as I was sharing, my story through social media. When I had this, I guess, relapse, if you will, right after I had my reconnection surgery, where I was able to finally eat again after months of not being able to drink or eat, my quality of life wasn't the best. Like I was eating again, but I was very dependent of using the bathroom. It was not the life that this was not the body I once knew. This was not the life I had asked for. And there were parts of me that questioned, like, if this is what my life is going to be like for the rest of my life, I don't know that I want this life. So I wrestled with that. And when I started having trouble tolerating food again. I ended up back in the hospital in the summer of 21, and that's where I experienced the lowest of lows. And there was a point where I really had kind of lost all hope, and I thought that this was just what my story was. Like, this is what it was going to be. And I know that for a lot of people, that may be the case, where you've reached the end of like what medicine can do to provide you with that quality of life. And I was at that moment, I did not feel strong enough to accept that. Acceptance was not something that I was able to find in that moment. Having an NG tube in my, placed for long periods of time was just, I felt insufferable. And there were moments where I just thought to myself, like, God, if this is what my life is going to be like just end it now. And I know that's a very hard thing to hear out loud. And for people who know me, a lot of times they'll often say, like, for everything you've been through, I would never be able to like tell from the way you carry yourself. You're so positive, you're always smiling. That was not always my journey. And, I had to really, really fight to, I guess, like rebuild that faith, restore my faith that God was going to, like, all this was happening for my good, right? And that in the end, God was not going to forsake me. And I have my journal here today because this was a journal that I was using during this healing journey. And I like to reflect back on it. And before coming on this recording, I looked at it because it brings a smile to my face to see the manifestation, right? Like going through that stage of just feeling so helpless, feeling so hopeless, and being at your rock bottom, and then being on the other side of that. And what a journey it has it been. But I'm here today to say that God is always with you, even when you're questioning him, even when you run out of faith. God is still there with you. And so there's something in here that I think that I said, if it wasn't for all that I suffered, I wouldn't know about your greatness. I wouldn't know what it means to be loved by you truly and unconditionally. And so while I don't necessarily wish to relive the things that I went through, I'm grateful that through that journey, I was able to experience God in the midst of that fire. That's where he was most present. And having that experience is, I can't even put it in words, but it almost, the way I live life now is I almost wear it as a shield, right? When life tries to throw something at you and the devil really tries to wear at your faith, I look back at the battles that, God has been in with me, and I try to wear that as my shield of protection, and know that I may not get the outcome that I want, but God is going to be there with me every step of the way.
Now let's pivot a little bit to some of those lifestyle changes that have been pretty substantial since, even first set of traumatic events that happened. You might have shifted the ways that you approach issues, for instance, like your stress levels and management. If you could share the techniques that you use to manage your stress, other lifestyle things, maybe your dietary choices that probably impacted significantly as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in terms of self-care for me, and this didn't come up as a result of this latest health trauma. This is something that I have always found healing through, but I reverted back to it during this time when I was going through my own recovery. And it was journaling. It was writing down what I was feeling. Sometimes it meant writing down my prayers. And I'm grateful that I did that, because even today I can look back at it and it's a source of encouragement. It's a nice way to kind of remind myself of where I've been, and how much God has worked in my life. Besides that, I've also, like, not recently, but closer to when I was, finally went back to work after being out of work for like a year and a half. I had started therapy as well. I'm someone who, as I mentioned in my bio, like, I have a master's in counseling, so I'm also very passionate about mental health and really making sure that you are taking care your mental well-being. It's been on my mind more recently to find another therapist. I had stopped who I was seeing before, but during the sessions that we did have, it was definitely a really necessary space. And it was the only time where I was able to really just unfold without having the concern in the back of my mind of how this information was going to burden the person receiving it, as a like self-proclaimed like born like helper. Oftentimes my MO is like I self-counsel or like self-soothe, so I can express what I'm going through to someone, but to with limitation, because then afterwards I'm thinking, oh my goodness, like, are they feeling sad by this? Like, are they scared now after I've shared this? And so therapy was the only place where I was able to really just be candid and share my deepest, darkest thoughts without feeling that guilt or fear of how it was going to burden others. So therapy, writing, art, like art and poetry was also something that I feel was also really helpful in my healing journey, just being able to create. There was something beautiful about the process of creating that felt incredibly healing for me. In terms of lifestyle changes, I mean, I'm still working on that, because I think that something that I struggle with still, and this is something that I think that I might be able to talk through more through therapy, is I think I still battle with the acceptance of the fact that there are certain limitations that, my body has now. And there are still lasting impacts of the trauma that I encountered, but there's a part of me that almost refuses to accept that, and doesn't want to, again, like live my life feeling limited. And so I could definitely be making healthier choices in the foods that I eat. That's not the part of my journey that I'm at yet. But it's certainly something that I think about often. And it's this fine line of not feeling like I'm depriving myself, but also being intentional with my body and what I put in it.
In saying that, the limitations that are there, inevitably they are there, but you choose to kind of rework it so that those limitations will lend themselves to building up strengths in another scenario.
Mhm.
So in my particular case, diet is pivotal. I've been on a medical diet for over a year now,
Oh,
very,
wow.
very strict in terms of like eating on a ketogenic medical diet. And that's one of the things that has helped me. But one of the main things, and you've touched on it, was gratitude journaling. Like people don't realize the impact that that has on your well-being, on your sleep. Like that was the biggest thing that changed for me. Once I started gratitude journaling, I was doing it in the morning, first thing in the morning before, but not before bed. And once I transitioned to doing it both times, I noticed that I was sleeping better. I had to do some detox things too, but
Mhm.
definitely the vivid dreams started tapering down, and the waking up in the middle of the night and not being able to fall back asleep, or insomnia, you can say. So those kinds of things faded away relatively quickly after I did the journaling. And a lot of people, maybe our audience, maybe they do journal, but they don't finish the journaling with some positive highlights. And even if it's three things that you can be grateful for in the day, if you're homebound, it's a little bit hard to come up with those, but you can be
Mhm.
thankful that maybe you are able to see the sunlight, or you're able to drink water or eat food even. So you mentioned that you didn't have that ability for quite some time. And I can imagine that that's something that you live every day in gratitude for, to be able to participate in social life. And eating is a big part of social
Yeah.
life.
Yeah, no, and those 6 months where I was not able to eat or drink were challenging. And I think that now being on this other side, it has like really increased my identity as a foodie, which is part of why I struggle with, finding a diet that, is healthier. Because I know what it's like to just be deprived, and I hated every part of that of my life. But I do remember it was a humbling experience going through that, right? Like you think about, um, you know, when I really think back about the things that cause people to suffer, right? Like, of course, like eating and drinking is a big deal, but then I think about it was also temporary, right? There are people who this is the rest of their lives, and so I do have to allow myself a moment to just feel grateful. And I remember there's a specific moment that comes to mind. It was leading up to that first big surgery after I had been sent home to just recover when my intestines were not attached, which is part of why I was not able to eat or drink anything at that time. And I was going back and forth between like, I felt like almost like the devil trying to provoke me to just give into fear. There was a part of me that was worried that I would go into the surgery and not come out of it. Um, and God was able to like place peace in my heart. And I remember, despite not being able to eat, despite not being able to drink, there was a moment where I was just sitting facing the window in my old apartment, and I just felt the sun on my skin. And I remember there was just something about that moment. I guess it was just like a moment of really practicing mindfulness and sitting in that feeling. And I received that almost like a hug from God, like a reassurance, and a reminder of what his peace can really feel like. Surrendering again, all those worries, all the things that could possibly go wrong, surrendering that to God, fully surrendering that and trusting that God was in control and that he was going to give me the victory. And it wasn't until like reframing it in that way that I was fully able to just say, God, have your way. And I'm just grateful that the outcome ended up, being the one that it was. But yeah, that was definitely a moment that I don't think I'll ever really forget.
If there's something that you would share to people living in a similar situation, whether it's having to undergo surgeries and being restricted so severely, what would you share to those people?
Wow, I tried to think about what I would say to answer this question, but I kind of just want to see what comes out organically from this. I think that ultimately there are no words I think that I could really offer. I think that that journey is between you and God, right? And for me, I can only speak for myself. Um, it was a relationship, right? It was, and in relationships, no relationship is perfect. There were times where I just didn't understand, like I could not wrap my head around like why I was being tested this way. And I think it's okay to be open and honest when you enter a conversation with God. You don't have to be rehearsed. You don't have to have this conventional, prayer prepared. Like, God already knows what's on your heart, right? Use that as an opportunity to just be able to express whatever's weighing on your heart. I think that there is something really transformative that can happen when you give yourself the opportunity just to sit in it. Whether that be all the things that you're unhappy about, all the regrets that you might be sitting with, resentment that you might be holding. Sometimes it is necessary to just sit in it. There's this expression that I think goes like, you have to go through it in order to grow through it. And I have definitely experienced that, or I guess my journey definitely embodies that saying. So there were moments where I just had to give myself permission to just not be okay. I didn't want to hear the fluffy, it's gonna be all right. Sometimes I just needed to be able to feel angry. And so I guess I would say to others, if you're going through something where you are really being tested, give yourself permission to feel, um, and through that process, be open to healing in whatever way that looks like for you. Um, for me, I can attest, and I will never get tired of saying that, um, you know, God is the ultimate healer, and he will never judge you. He loves you unconditionally, even when you reject him, even when you don't believe in what he's capable of doing it for you. He still loves you, and he still loves you, and he's still working for your good. And I'm so grateful that he never gave up on me. I'm so grateful that he placed all of these incredible people to support me through through that journey, who quite literally had people pray me back to life. I've used that expression to describe my husband, who can tell you countless stories of the nights that he cried out to God and prayed to bring me back to him. And oh, I'm getting emotional. And it's through those moments that I have truly seen God's glory. And I'm so grateful that he has given me a testimony that can hopefully encourage others who are dealing with battles that are beyond what they can ever carry the strength to deal with. And if you view me today and see a soldier or someone who is strong, just know that that strength did not come from my human spirit. It only came from God. And so I pray that in whatever part of your journey you're on, that you are able to experience God in the way that I have.
Amen to that. And also the people around you, they were definitely filled with the Spirit too, because their faith sometimes carries us through when we're in those dips. And, you're going through the midst of it. So you feel like, okay, is this my time? Is my time over? What is my story going to unfold? And
Mhm.
with them, it just kind of magnifies. So you have the faith in you, the faith through your friends and through your family members or loved ones. And then that kind of expands to a larger circle. So I believe that this is part of the story so that we can bring more people to the knowledge, in general, the knowledge. So for people who want to know more about your story, or if they want to actually reach out to you, is there somewhere they can go to reach you?
Yeah, so during my recovery period, I started another Instagram account that's public. It was just a platform for me to share some of the things that I was feeling. I talked about some of my encounters, I think, with God, but that handle is "and I'm feeling good." So ANDIMFEELINGOOD. So feeling without the G, feeling good. I chose that handle purposely because, as you'll see in the bio for that, it says something along the lines like "on a journey to feel good again." And I think most of us are on that journey, right? Because life continues, life be lifing. And no matter, how much you overcome, there will always be moments where you are tested. And so through that process, I hope that whatever I've shared on that can be used as a form of encouragement to keep pushing. And, again, giving yourself permission to just sit in it. And that's okay too. That's part of the healing journey. And then my personal Instagram handle, where I've shared more of my, I guess, more of the vulnerable parts of my journey, is the 0H_Claudia. But happy to share that as well.
Thank you. We'll make sure to include those in the show notes for people who want to reach out to you. And definitely, we see the sheer determination and the grit that you portray. And it's so refreshing to see that you're a real person experiencing real things and you still have such an optimistic outlook for the future. So we thank you so much. I know it's exceptionally difficult to relive some of these traumas that you've been through. We appreciate it. I know our audience appreciates it. And anything else that you would want to relate to our audience before we let you go?
Just want to say thank you so much for this opportunity. Anytime I dive into sharing my story, I never really know what's going to come to the surface. Of course, like, I've shared this story multiple times. I never plan when I will feel emotional. And I think that part of what I've learned is that I think there's an appreciation in not coming fully prepared, because that's where I think sometimes the best conversations happen, is when you are just allowing them to flow out organically. But I think that for listeners, if there's anything that you take from hearing this story, I guess it would be just to you know be be brave enough to feel the fear and do it anyway. It's a saying that I've also chosen to live by. there's so much joy left to be experienced. And sure, there might be circumstances that you may be dealing with that limit what that could look like for you. But there's so many versions of joy. It's up to you. And I think it's all a matter of perspective, right? And so don't give up on chasing after joy, and don't give up on the idea that you can't experience peace either. The form of peace that you can only feel, I think, through God truly, and whatever capacity that feels or looks like to you. But like I mentioned, I felt it in my spirit to wear this shirt today because there have been moments in my healing journey where I've had a choice of living my life in fear that the rug will get pulled out from underneath me again. But life is short, as we all know, and so I choose instead to try to live my life as fearlessly as possible. And again, that doesn't mean that there are moments where I'm just not afraid. It means to feel the fear and do it anyway. Like, have the courage to chase after joy, even if it means that there's risk, right? Have the courage to continue to live life as much as you possibly can.
Thanks so much for joining us today, and we hope that the audience can definitely feel uplifted by your message. So thank you, Claudia, and thank you to you guys.
Thank you,
Thank you to all of our
Sharon.
listeners. Take care.
Appreciate you so much.